This is SaaStr's Founders Favorite series, where you can hear some of the best from SaaStr speakers. This is where the cloud meets. Guru is the knowledge management solution that delivers the information you need when and where you need it. Guru lets your team capture information instantly wherever it surfaces. Slack, Gmail, Salesforce, Microsoft Outlook and Teams, and more, without ever leaving their workflow. Visit getguru.com/SaaStr to get Guru for free. Up today, Zapier CEO Wade Foster.
All right, you want to hit a few of the things that we wanted to chat about on this list?
Sure, let's do it.
First of all, just because it's fun. Well, actually, before we get there, does everyone get Zapier pronounced right? Like, what are the odds that folks get it pronounced right?
I think mostly... I think it probably is like 40-60 right and to wrong.
Right. Do you roll either way or do you?
I roll either way because, so here's what I like to tell myself. This is how I sleep at night. It's like a GIF thing. So there's like an internet controversy. People like a controversy and it creates word of mouth.
It is.
That's what I tell myself to sleep at night.
Because I think that the zap is like a hard consonant and it's hard to say it. It's hard to say it, isn't it?
Yeah, but you want to zap stuff. Like that's what you're trying to do. Like you're trying to zap things. So Zapier, but you know, when you can't afford domain names in 2011 because they're all taken, you get the one with one P because that's what's available.
I got it.
And it has API in the name, so it's kind of clever. But
it did. I didn't actually know that till the last time we met that it had API in the name.
Yeah, right? But turns out cleverness is not a great marketing strategy.
Like the arrow in the FedEx logo that you don't know until someone, and then you're like, oh my God, there's an arrow.
You can't unsee it. Yeah, or the A to Z in Amazon, right? Like, you know,
I guess it could have been little Z, big API. It wouldn't have been hip, but
So we did do that. The original logo has API in gray.
I see.
And it's not, it's not super hip, but whatever.
All right. So for folks that don't know the company, I don't want to go back and talk about the early days when you went through Y Combinator enough. That's all fun and game. I want to talk about forward-looking stuff, but give us a rough sense. Where are you at today? How big are you? You've talked a little bit about revenues. How many employees?
Yeah.
And what do you want to accomplish maybe by the end of the year?
Sure. Zapier, 300 employees, global, fully distributed team. Well over 100,000 customers. Last revenue number we talked about was early last year, 50 million ARR.
So more than that today.
Yeah, more than that today. What do we want to accomplish this year? I think a big part of it is we've got the company's product. We want to do a better job of servicing these mid-market users, make sure that we're there for them. We want to do a much better job of making automation easier. I think there's an opportunity for us to really make setting this stuff up super simple. It's still, it used to be engineers did all this work. It used to be that you had like IT staff that did all this.
Yep.
Now with Zapier, like anyone can do it. But it's still a little nerdy, like it's still a little technical. And so I think there's more we can do to abstract away parts of that. So your run-of-the-mill sales rep or your run-of-the-mill like recruiter or whoever can just sort of step in and be like, automation is part of my tool set. It's how I do my job. It's how I'm more effective at my work. So there's a whole bunch of design and simplification and product extensions that we have in mind to like really make that first run experience really good.
Well, that's it. So when I like, essentially when I think about folks that I work with that use Zapier, like I would say, for example, tech focused marketers, folks that are next generation, they love the app. Right?
Yeah, they're all in.
They're like, I can't connect my dated marketing automation app to my janky CRM to my website because we are all using hundreds of apps, right? So forget about even a lay engineer. I think a technical marketer can use the product and love it, right?
Yeah.
But what's the next frontier beyond that? But I don't know. But you still need to be. I don't know what the term is, but it's like web savvy. Like you got to be web savvy, right? So do you think someone that isn't web savvy will be able to use the product as effectively as someone that is by the end of the year?
I think it'll get. I hope so, right? Like that's the goal.
What do you need to do that just to help out? Because this is something we'll run out of time to talk about no code maybe and all this stuff, but that's an element of getting beyond the web savvy, right? Just getting the web aware.
So I think there's
like web aware people. How can a web aware people use your application, right?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is we get get simpler, we get easier. So we find better entry points into the product that, like, as you're going about just using these tools, like, you're prompted to set up Zaps, and there's like very little configuration to go on. I still remember my experience using Squarespace in the early days. When you had to configure like the DNS settings and stuff like that, Squarespace has always been easy, but it used to be like you had a tutorial open on one side, and then like you were going through their setup flow on the other, and you're like copying and pasting links into it. Yep. So it was easy in the fact that it was straightforward, but there was just a lot you had to do. Now, when you go in to set up a Squarespace site, you like buy the domain, and then they have a little spinner, and they're like, ta-da, your site's ready for you.
So that's what you want. It integrates with Google domains, right? And you want that, right? Even I get a headache. I screw it up. I can't remember what my C name is or my whatever it is, and I want to just jump off the roof.
And it's not that it's hard. It's just that there's a lot of steps, and you're copying and pasting a bunch. And so like that's our job, is to get rid of all that stuff where it's like you don't care about that. Like you just want it to work for you.
And so what's the single hardest part of that you want to conquer this year? Like, do you have a sense of what
I think a big part of it. Yeah, a big part of it is like, you're mapping data from different services, one service to another. And so how do you abstract that stuff away?
It's always been wrong. It's always the corner in the edge cases break, right?
Yeah.
The fields don't match. There's more than 256 characters in the wrong field. The data doesn't flow the right way. How do you...
And then you get an error message that like a user looks at and they're like, what the heck is this?
How do you do this at scale?
Yeah. So, I mean, the big part of it is you just get a lot of data, and you start to know, and you can match on other users' use cases and say, hey, you're trying to do this stuff. We're going to, take those configurations, and we're going to make those default configurations for other folks. So out of the box, it sort of works.
Yep. And last one, and then I want to tie this into a question, but do you think, I used to hate this term persona, but I've evolved. I do think it summarizes a lot of things as organization. I used to hate alignment as a term now, and now I like it. But as you look to that future, is there a different persona that will use the product? I
definitely think so. Right now,
you have a name for this person?
We don't have a name yet. We're going through all of our segmentation
salesperson.
Yeah, we're doing all the segmentation work and things like that right now. But I think you hit it on the head, where it's like web savvy, like tech forward, technology oriented companies love Zapier today. Now it's about how do you get it in companies that maybe there's a web savvy person in the company, but maybe the company isn't tech forward. So like, how do you enable them to like implement it inside their organizations? And then how do you go the next step further, where it's like, I'm just an organization and technology is sort of being foisted upon me. And like, I just got to catch up. Like the cloud is everywhere. Well, how do you make sure you get that sort of last wave of folks on board with it? And, as companies age and grow, like you're trying to you're trying to get as far through that thing as you possibly can. That's how you get as much market penetration as you want.
And what is, give me this next question I have, because it's early in the year, and you're at a very interesting point, because you're trying to connect whatever we call them. We can call them, how many apps do you connect? 1,000 apps? 5,000?
We're 1,600 right now.
Okay, but there's a lot of clouds in those apps that you're connecting. So, and you're trying to do it in a much more effortless way than enterprise products. So you're forced to think about the future of the cloud in a way different than the Davos sound bites. What do you see down the pike that other folks don't see, because you're in this intersection? What do you see happening, not this year, but in 3 to 4 years, that maybe even could disrupt Zapier, right? That even could change the ecosystem. But what are you worried about or excited about that maybe other people don't see it crisply?
I think there's just a explosion in the number of tools that people use. I think a lot of folks, we all use like the big stuff, right? We all use Slack, we all use Zoom, we all use G Suite, like we all use that stuff. But every org has like a slice of tools that like, you could probably tell me right now, like a half a dozen tools where I'd be like, what is that? How does it work? I'm not sure how it is.
And I rely on them.
Yeah, and you rely on it. And it's probably a 10 million ARR business. And it's like a really solid business. So I think there is going to be just it wouldn't surprise me if like the new sort of like, family business is like a software shop, a SaaS business that does like 10 million in ARR, $1 million in ARR, somewhere in between there. And is like pretty successful. Yeah, it's not a venture scale business, and no one ever talks about these types of business, but they're everywhere right now.
They are.
And they have like pretty significant, if you group them all together, there's pretty significant adoption across all those tools. And they need them to work with all this other stuff that they have. And so, I think we like to think of tech as, hey, the FANG companies and, these big SaaS companies and whatnot. But there's a lot of tech that's not that.
Yeah. And what do you think at the other end of the spectrum of things like UiPath and Automation Anywhere that are, or even Plaid from the other day? I know they sound like a bunch of apps, but they're taking another approach. They're bypassing APIs. They're using next generation scraping, flat files, and whatever it takes to make anything work. Where does that's like, in some ways, it's the opposite end of what you're doing, but
it really is.
In some ways, you're trying to solve similar problems, though, aren't you?
Those are important problems to solve. I think they're transitionary problems is how I would talk about them, where they're big
until like 2040.
I mean, perhaps, yeah. Like, enterprise moves slow, right? But I think we all know that like APIs are a better way to consume data. Like this is the ideal state. This is, when let's use like files as an example. Like Drive was into the market before Dropbox was, but Drive said like it's all about the cloud. It's all about docs and sheets and stuff like that. They didn't think about file formats and whatnot. Dropbox was like, we're just going to start by syncing your file formats. We're going to deal with all this crufty, old school desktop related stuff and do it really well. And in some ways, that's sort of transitionary. Like we're all now on the cloud. Like we don't actually, outside of photos and maybe videos, we don't actually interact with files all that much anymore. So in some respects, like Dropbox was focused on a transitionary thing, but they used that to build $1 billion business out of it. Now they got to figure out how do they exist in a world where most everything is cloud. I suspect they'll figure it out. But it's the same thing, I think, with when you look at like UiPath and Automation Anywhere, is they're tackling this thing that is a massive problem, but all those things are somewhat fragile. Like businesses don't want it to operate like that for forever. So 2040, like what's the better way to do this stuff?
Yeah. I want to throw out one thought that you kind of teased at, and then I want to hit the next one on our list. But we launched this product called Sasser University just a couple days ago to take all of our 6,000 articles and blog posts and like organize it for the next generation. And we already have almost 4,000 founders on it. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
And I didn't have time. Over the holidays, I had extra time and I picked a platform, right, called Mighty Networks. Mm-hmm. And it's very limited and it's very slick because it's like a social network with learning attached. And it only has 3 integrations in it. It has Google Analytics. It has something I forget, and it has Zapier to solve all the things that it doesn't integrate with.
Yeah.
Now, that's profound, right? You can think about it, right? And that there's a bunch of things to think about. That's a brand that you have, right? It's a product. And once you have, and you know that I've gotten passionate about that, once you have a brand and you're past that point, how are you thinking about leaning in so that everyone will build? There's only 3 products in this product you probably never even heard of until I brought it up, right? You're the only one of the 3. And they're not going to probably put the effort in. Whoever your number 2 competitor is, I don't know who it is, they're not going to do the effort.
Yeah, not for Mighty Networks, right?
Yeah, they're not going to do it, right? And because they got too much stuff else to do, right? Yeah. So we already used it to hook up to Marketo and some other things. But are you leaning in on that as you're kind of thinking about 9 figures and beyond in revenue? What are you doing to build on that and not break that relationship and build on your brand?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for us, we're about connecting the tools you use. And so the tools you use are like so critical for us where, we're going to make sure that we have every app on the platform, period. Like everything is going to be supported by Zapier, and the stuff that everyone uses is going to be supported super well. Like we're going to make sure that the G Suites, the Slacks, the like stuff everyone uses is going to be really good, really good.
But you'll do that no matter what it takes. Like
we'll do that no matter what it takes.
You've got to have a Slack team internally, don't you, to make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, we have people dedicated to sort of the top, in apps on the platform, right?
Do you get early access to their platform changes and know ahead of time?
Oh yeah, we work with them and in fact, oftentimes we try and build stuff together for that stuff. So we're the guinea pigs on new weird things.
Those ones you've got deep relationships, right? You're getting access to their staging servers and preview releases and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and then for the long tail of folks, you're trying to provide tooling. You're trying to export the things you're learning with your top in apps and make it really easy for them to self-serve, to build similar type experiences to what you're trying to do on this more experimental big side of things.
But like Mighty Networks, you're not making any money off them directly, right? So what do you, maybe you are, but I don't, it's small, right? What are you doing to empower that long tail in 2020?
Yeah, you just give them tools. Like you give them the things they can solve the problems themselves, right? Like these orgs, like they need it. Their customers are begging for integrations. And so Zapier is like the easiest thing they can do to be able to say.
That's why it's one of the three. It's the easiest thing they can do, right?
Yeah, it literally is the easiest, fastest thing they can do. And so our job is, if it's not the easiest, fastest thing that we can do, we're in trouble. So we need to continue to be the easiest, fastest thing they can do to say yes to all these customer feature requests.
There's just one thing I want to go back in time on, because when we were at the Inbound conference, we chatted about it, which was the early days when you had to build the integrations yourself versus when it crossed over, right? And it never fully changes because you're working with your top customers team. So you're still building these.
Yeah, we still build stuff ourselves.
But when does that, it maybe power dynamics the wrong term, but when do the relationships change? How should you be aware of it? I see a lot of folks that like, especially folks that have good but not great engineering teams, they want the partners to do all the work.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard enough just to build an API. If you have no experience, it's not easy. It's not easy to build an API. And you have 4 engineers, and some like pretty good but not great engineer needs 6 months to build your API. And then Slack comes in and like, Slack's not going to build it.
No.
So what did you learn, and when is it appropriate to ask the partner to do the work instead of you, and if you want to have a positive ecosystem?
I think there's sort of 2 things. You have to have something that people want at the end of the day. Like you're not going to be a platform if people don't want it. Typically, that means you got a lot of users. Like typically that means, because that's what most of us are trying to do. We're trying to tap into a user base that we feel like
we want to pick the top 3 platforms and build on them, right?
Yeah, it's like we're going to build on Slack because so everyone uses Slack, and so we'll get all their users. That's like the dream. It doesn't really play out like that, but that's the dream. Or like you have some other, like there has to be some other reason. If it's not for access to your customers, like what is it that you're providing them that they're willing to say, you know what? We're going to do a thing that isn't going to impact our entire customer base.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment we were having this debate very early on. I remember the moment it flipped a switch in our head. And it was when Aaron from Box, he sent us an email like at 2 a.m. on a Saturday and was like, why isn't Box on Zapier? And the answer was like, well, we're 3 people just going as fast as we can. Like, of course, Box should be on Zapier. We're just not there yet. But that got us thinking, like, he sent us an email in the middle of the night, like maybe he would put an engineer on it. Like if he cares enough to do that, maybe he would do that. And so we just emailed him and said, hey, would you put an engineer on this if we had a way for you to do it? And he was like, sure. And so we were like, okay, that's enough of a signal for us that if we make the tooling good enough, maybe they would go do it. I think a lot of us have this dream that's like everyone's going to build on us, but basically no evidence that someone would do such a thing. So for me, it's like you got to have some evidence that someone's willing to go do that before you go stake the future of your company on this platform vision.
Yep. And the Aaron Levy story is a good one. And sometimes what happens too is, you think everyone's going to build on your API and no one does. But often what happens in the early days is there's 1 or 2 high affinity partners. Sometimes they're another little company in YC. Sometimes they're a big company. But you saw, they may not even be huge. They may be one of your 10 million mom companies. But you solve a big arse problem for them. So they bring you into every deal overnight. I've had a few. Did you have any experience like that where someone needed you?
I mean, we've seen it definitely. We've definitely seen it over the years where like Zapier is, but basically like if you don't use Zapier alongside the tool, like the tool itself kind of doesn't do enough.
Do they pull you into, do they literally package you up with their product and pull you into deals?
I mean, they start, basically they're like, you should just use Zapier. Like a company like Clearbit, take that for example.
Yes.
It's a dev tool. However, a lot of their companies aren't devs.
Well, Clearbit's super interesting. It's a dev tool and a lot of marketers and others want to use it.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, if you want to use it, but you're not a dev, how do you do that?
Yes.
Zapier.
That's how our marketing tool uses it. Yep, exactly. Are you aligned, even though you're both dev tools in a sense, are you aligned from a go-to-market perspective? Is it totally incidental? Do you guys know each other? Do you work together?
We know each other. It's mostly incidental. Like we're not aligned. We don't have like co-selling agreements or anything like that.
You have like a BD team or a partner team that helps facilitate this stuff?
Yeah, we do. So we have
what's their KPI, or do they have a goal for 2020 or a job?
Yeah, there's different teams. So like we have teams focused on our biggest apps. And so that's a different goal versus like teams that are focused on the programs that you put in place to, help for the 1,000 apps and whatnot like that. So
cool. Yeah. All right, I want to talk about for a couple minutes before we run out of time. I want to talk about distributed teams, which is your super passion. But I want to dig in on a few topics that maybe you talk about a little bit less that we've chatted about. Mm-hmm. The first one is just advice. Okay, first of all, I need your advice.
All right.
I'm struggling to learn how to do this, and you could give me personal advice, which I will be grateful for. But the meta point is, I know your point, which is great, which is good counsel, which is go all in early, right? Yeah. It's almost your act. The Zapier story is you have the co-founders. Your co-founder goes through YC, has to go back to the Midwest, and you decided you better learn how to do it because you have no choice. It's a great story. Yeah. But a lot of us don't start that way, right? Mm-hmm. I invested in another YC company that I love that's a rocket ship, and they're 10 dudes, all guys, which is bad, right, in 2020, all working in one room that have coded together for years. Yeah. And then they just broke it all up and said, we're going 100% distributed. Mm-hmm. Right. But how do you, that's like such a big culture change from programmers to what's your advice if you don't start there? What's your advice to folks you've met that are at 10, 20 or 100? And it's not that I want to have a remote, an extra office, because that's not the same.
No, it's not.
It's not even remotely the same, is it?
So I think, I've given this advice to a few folks, and a few folks have followed up on it, and it seems to work. If you follow it through, it seems to work. Now, like anything, you have to commit to it, which is let's call it 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks is long enough, but you might need to do longer. It's enough time where you basically have to deal with it, where you can't say, I'm going to go back to the office. But 2 weeks, no one can come to the office. Doors are locked. You can't show up. Okay. And it has to be long enough where your default response is not like, well, when we're in the office again, let's make sure to discuss this. Or when we're in the office again, let's make sure to figure this out. So it has to be long enough. It doesn't have to be the whole company, but just take a team first. So if you have like a small team, that team, lock the doors on them. Everyone's from home, even the boss. You have to just do it and figure out we have a core problem to deal with, and we just don't have any of the tooling, any of the documentation, any of the infrastructure set up to deal with it. And so you'll just start realizing okay, we got to start putting in a little bit of a process for this, a little bit of a discipline around this type of thing. Yeah. And then even if you decide, hey, we're not going to be fully remote, we're actually going to go back into the office, just the exercise of having done that will make you a better run company. You still decide to run out of an office, you'll get to bring some good habits from that exercise.
Well, I love that idea. I'm going to think about that. Based on those learnings in your own, what about folks who they really enjoy being in the office, right? If you have an office, they have, it's their time away. It's their third place, and they don't want to work. I mean, I'm looking at you on Zoom in your home office, which I've seen on a few videos, but not everyone has a home office. Maybe there's 4 of us in an apartment in San Francisco, and we don't even want to go to WeWork, right? I mean, maybe that's the answer, but what do you do for folks that it's not just collaborating, they literally want a third place? Yeah. Because you've got 500 employees, right? So you have to have thought about this.
Yeah, we've got 300. So we are at a point now where, first thing there's a certain amount of this where if your social life comes from the office, if that's how you get your connection to your community, a fully distributed team, it might just be tough for you. It just could be a thing of hey, you should opt out of that. That said, some of these companies are getting big enough that we're starting to solve some of these problems too, where, at Zapier, certain cities have a pretty high number of employees. I think Portland has 25 people for us. Yep. And there's a whole social scene around work for folks in Portland where we don't have an office for them, but a person on that team schedules coffee shop meetups and happy hours and come over to our family's house for dinner on a Friday night, events for the team where you start to build camaraderie and a real sense of community around the people you work with. And so I think you try and just find little nuggets like that where you can provide some of that. It's never going to be the same thing as showing up in an office at 40 hours a week, But I don't know that you need that. I don't know that everyone wants the full thing. They just want a little bit. They don't want to feel like they're on an island by themselves.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, this was great. Thanks for being part of the SaaStr community. I think you were at SaaStr like 2016 or 2017 or something.
Yeah, it was a long time. I remember it was like sub 1,000 people was the first one.
Yeah, you're coming back like this year, which is grateful. You've done the podcast before, so thanks for everything, and thanks for teaching us. I mean, I'm sure I know doing this kind of stuff is good, but I think really we are learning about distributed teams and no code from you in a big way, and I'm personally learning. So thanks for everything that you do.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thanks to you as well. I think we're all learning from the SaaStr community together. We're all
the cloud keeps evolving. We're all learning, right?
Yep, that is the truth.
All right, man. I'll see you in San Jose, and we'll chat in a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Say goodbye to slip-ups. Old news is a thing of the past. With Guru's verification tool, you'll always be confident that your team's knowledge is up to date and accurate because it's verified by your in-house experts. SaaStr listeners can get Guru for free today by visiting getguru.com/SaaStr.